Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy History Channel. Tonight, we step into the world of life as a medieval peasant. Not the version found in simple stories, but the real world of skill, pressure, custom, and survival. This was a life shaped by land. Every season carried a question. Every household depended on knowledge passed down through hands as much as words. A peasant's world could be small, but it was never simple. A village was a system of labor, memory, law, faith, and obligation. People knew the value of a good harvest. They knew the danger of a bad one. They knew how quickly fortune could turn. Tonight, we will look closely at the people who fed kingdoms. Their lives were often hard. They were also more complex than many of us imagine. If you enjoy these gentle journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, all you need to do is settle in. Let your shoulders soften. Allow your breathing to slow. And as the day begins to fade, join me as we explore this medieval world together. Let's begin. Medieval peasants worked fewer days than many modern office workers. The surprising part is not that rural life was easy. It was not. The work could be backbreaking, cold, wet, and uncertain. But the rhythm of labor was not the same as a modern year. In many parts of medieval Europe, the church calendar filled the year with holy days when ordinary fieldwork was restricted or paused. Sundays also mattered, and major festivals could bring rest, worship, markets, games, and communal meals. During the busiest seasons, especially harvest, people might work from dawn until the light failed. At other times, the pace could slow sharply. Winter brought repairs, animal care, spinning, wood gathering, and indoor tasks, but not the same relentless pressure as summer fields. This makes peasant time feel strange to us. Their lives were hard because survival was fragile, not because every day looked identical. They lived by bursts of urgent labor, followed by pauses that belonged to religion, weather, and custom. Most medieval people lived and died within one small village. For many rural families, the gnome world was astonishingly local. A person might be born in a cottage, grow up beside the same fields, marry someone from nearby, and be buried within sight of the church they had attended since childhood. That does not mean they knew nothing of the wider world. News traveled through markets, priests, pilgrims, soldiers, traders, and wandering workers. A royal death or a war could reach a village as spoken news long before most people ever saw a written notice. Still, daily knowledge was rooted in a tight circle of paths, boundaries, wells, mills, woods, and fields. People knew which patch of ground flooded first. They knew whose cow broke fences. They knew who had borrowed seed and who had failed to repay it. This closeness could feel protective, but it could also feel inescapable. Reputation mattered because memory was long. In such a place, privacy was rare, and belonging was everything. A single failed harvest could change an entire family's fate. Rural households often lived with very little cushion. A strong harvest could fill barns, settle dues, feed animals, and leave seed for the next year. A poor one could break that balance at once. If grain ran short, a family still needed to pay obligations. They still needed to eat. They still needed seed for spring. Selling an animal might solve one problem while creating another, because livestock provided manure, traction, milk, or future income. Borrowing grain could help a household survive, but debt might follow them for years. Hunger also made people more vulnerable to illness, and illness reduced the labor needed to recover. That is why harvest failure was not one event. It was a chain reaction. Weather, storage, rents, prices, and health could all tighten together. Medieval people understood this deeply. The sight of damaged crops was not merely disappointing. It was a warning that the future had begun to narrow. Bread was so important that bad flour could spark unrest. Grain was the center of survival for much of medieval Europe. Bread filled stomachs in a way that vegetables, ale, and occasional meat could not. It was daily food, but it was also a measure of whether the world was working properly. When flour was poor, short, adulterated, or too expensive, people felt the danger immediately. A bad loaf could mean more than disappointment. It could mean hunger moving closer to the door. Milling and baking were therefore watched with suspicion. Was the miller taking too much as his fee? Was the baker cheating the weight? Was the grain damp or spoiled? Such questions mattered because ordinary families lived close to the edge. In towns, bread prices could trigger anger quickly. In villages, poor flour could expose deeper tensions over harvests, rents, and rights. To us, bread may seem ordinary. To them, it was security made visible. A loaf on the table meant that tomorrow still had a chance. A peasant's whole year was ruled by the farming calendar. The months were not just names on a page. They were instructions. Early spring meant preparing earth that had hardened through winter. Sowing had to happen when the ground was ready, not when a person felt ready. Haymaking arrived before grain harvest because animals needed fodder before cold weather returned. Then came the tense weeks when ripe crops had to be cut, gathered, dried, and stored before rain could ruin them. Autumn brought ploughing for winter grain and careful decisions about which animals could be fed through the colder months. Nothing stood alone. A late frost could disturb the next task. A wet summer could delay the one after that. Even feast days and village gatherings were wrapped around this cycle. People watched soil, clouds, birds, and animals with practical attention. Their calendar was not abstract. It lived under their feet. It told them when to hope, when to hurry, and when to fear hunger. Peasants could owe rent, labor, eggs, grain, and prayers. Obligation in a medieval village was not always a simple payment of money. Many households lived inside a web of duties that reached toward the manor, the church, and their neighbors. A tenant might give a portion of grain after harvest. Another might spend set days working the Lord's land before tending his own. Some owed hens at a particular season, or eggs at Easter, or a fee when a daughter married. The church expected tithes, usually a share of produce. Spiritual duties also mattered. Prayers, attendance, offerings, and respect for holy days were part of the social order. What makes this so revealing is how mixed the economy was. Cash existed, but rural life often moved through things: time, service, and custom. A peasant's wealth might sit in a stack of barley, a pig, a patch of beans, or a promise remembered by the court. Debt was not always written down. Sometimes it was lived. The Lord's mill could turn every harvest into extra profit. In many manors, peasants were not free to grind grain wherever they liked. They had to use the Lord's mill, and the miller took a portion as payment. This could feel like a small rule, but it touched almost every household. Grain that had been grown through months of labor could not become usable flour until it passed through a controlled place. The mill itself was a marvel of power. Water or wind turned heavy stones with a force no hand could match. Yet that same usefulness made it profitable. The Lord could collect from each sack, harvest after harvest. For peasants, this made the mill both necessary and resented. It stood at the meeting point of technology and authority. People needed it, but they knew it took from them. Some tried hand mills in secret, depending on local rules and risks. A turning wheel could look peaceful, but beneath it sat one of the sharpest facts of rural power. Many peasants knew the land more intimately than any noble. A lord might own fields on a charter, but the people who worked them understood their living details. They knew which soil held water after rain. They knew where the frost lingered. They knew which furrows were heavy, which paths turned dangerous in winter, and which hedges needed repair before animals strayed. This knowledge did not come from books. It came from repetition, observation, and the pressure of needing to be right. A noble could speak of an estate as income. A peasant saw it as hundreds of small signs. The angle of a field mattered. The quality of a ditch mattered. The timing of birdsong or the swelling of buds might hint at changing weather. These details could shape planting, grazing, and harvest decisions. Such knowledge was rarely celebrated in chronicles because chroniclers cared more about kings and wars. Yet the food supply of whole societies depended on this skilled attention, practiced by people whose expertise was often invisible. Village life was crowded, watchful, noisy, and deeply connected. A medieval village was not a lonely scatter of cottages. It was a place where lives pressed closely together. People shared fields, paths, wells, pastures, ovens, gossip, labor, worship, and risk. Sound carried easily. A quarrel might be heard by neighbors. A sick animal could become everyone's concern if it threatened shared herds. Smoke drifted from hearths. Bells marked sacred time. Tools struck wood and metal. Children moved between households, and animals wandered where they should not. This closeness created support. During harvest, neighbors could gather quickly. During grief, the community knew. During celebration, the whole village might join. But the same closeness also created tension. Secrets were hard to keep. Reputation could shape marriage, borrowing, and trust. The village was a safety net and a stage. Everyone had a place, and everyone was seen. It was not a silent rural dream. It was a living crowd, bound together by need. Smoke from indoor fires filled homes for much of winter. A medieval cottage could be warm and harsh at the same time. Many rural homes had open fires and limited chimneys, so smoke drifted upward, curled beneath the roof, and slowly escaped through gaps, doors, vents, or thatch. People lived with stinging eyes, darkened rafters, and the smell of burning fuel in hair and cloth. This sounds miserable, and often it was, but smoke also had uses. It helped dry roof timbers. It discouraged insects. It could cure meat or fish hanging above the fire. The same haze that irritated lungs could protect precious stores from decay. Winter made the problem stronger because doors stayed closed against cold weather. Children, elders, and anyone already weak would have felt the effects most. The home was therefore a place of shelter and exposure together. It protected people from frost, but it filled their breathing space with the cost of survival. Warmth arrived with smoke as its shadow. Medieval cottages often housed people, tools, food, and animals together. The peasant home was not designed around modern privacy. It was built around survival. A single building might hold sleeping spaces, stored grain, tools, firewood, tubs, baskets, and sometimes livestock in an adjoining byre or nearby partition. Keeping animals close could protect them from theft, cold, and predators. It also placed valuable creatures where the family could hear trouble quickly. The arrangement brought smells, noise, dirt, and warmth. A cow or goat was not merely an animal. It was food security, future income, and manure for fields. tools were equally important. A broken rake or missing knife could slow essential work. Food stores had to be guarded from damp and pests. Every object in the home had a reason for being there. A cottage was therefore part shelter, part workshop, part storehouse, and part animal space. It may look cramped to us, but to the people inside it, closeness was a practical defense against loss. Straw mattresses could hide fleas, lice, and other nightly visitors. Sleep was not always peaceful just because the day had ended. Many peasant beds were made from straw, chaff, wool, rushes, or other available materials, often covered with blankets or rough cloth. These fillings could be warm and cheap, but they also attracted tiny life. Fleas, lice, mites, and bedbugs could settle into bedding, clothing, hair, and cracks in timber. People tried to manage them through washing, airing, shaking, herbs, smoke, and changing straw when possible. Still, complete escape was difficult. Animals nearby increased the problem, as did shared sleeping spaces. The discomfort was more than irritation. Bites could disturb rest, spread infection, and make already hard lives harder. Yet bedding itself mattered deeply. A raised bed, a better blanket, or cleaner straw could mark a real improvement. In a world where sleep prepared the body for labor, the battle against pests was part of the wider battle to stay strong enough for tomorrow. Medieval peasants rarely owned the land they worked each day. The fields that fed a family were often held through custom rather than full ownership. A tenant might have the right to use certain strips, pass them to heirs, and depend on them for survival. Yet those rights came with duties to a lord, and they could be limited by local law. This creates a world that is easy to misunderstand. A peasant could feel deeply attached to land without owning it in the modern sense. A ridge of soil might have been worked by a father, a grandmother, and a great-grandfather. It held memory as well as crops. But rent, labor, fees, and permission could still shape what happened there. The land was personal and controlled at the same time. That tension ran through rural life. People built identity from fields they could lose, improve, inherit, or dispute. The soil was home, workplace, wealth, and obligation all at once, which made every boundary matter. The open field system made farming a shared village puzzle. In many regions, arable land was divided into large fields, and each household held scattered strips within them. This arrangement looks strange at first. Why not keep one neat block for each family? The answer lies in fairness and risk. Soil quality varied across a village. Some ground drained well. Some was stony. Some lay closer to paths. By scattering strips, families received a mixture rather than one lucky or unlucky parcel. But this also meant farming had to be coordinated. If animals were to graze stubble after harvest, everyone needed crops cleared in time. If a field was left fallow, the plan affected many households at once. Ploughing, sowing, and grazing became communal decisions shaped by custom. Individual choice existed, but not in isolation. The landscape itself required cooperation. A village field was not just land. It was a practical map of negotiation, memory, fairness, and dependence, drawn in long, narrow strips. Strips of land were scattered to spread risk across soil. A family might farm several pieces of ground that lay far apart, each one narrow enough to seem almost fragile. This was not random disorder. It was a strategy for surviving uneven land. A low strip might be rich, but vulnerable to flooding. A higher one might be drier, but thinner. Another might sit near a road, which saved effort, but invited damage from passing animals. By holding pieces in different places, a household reduced the chance that one local problem would ruin everything. The system also reflected older agreements, inheritances, exchanges, and village memory. Over generations, the pattern could become complicated, but it carried a practical wisdom. Farming was uncertain, so risk had to be shared across space. A peasant walking between strips was not merely crossing a field. He was moving through a survival plan created by custom, argument, and experience. Each strip represented a small bet against hunger. Oxen were often more valuable than a peasant's entire home. A cottage might shelter a family, but a working animal could make farming possible. Oxen pulled heavy plows through soil that human strength alone could not manage efficiently. They were slower than horses in many tasks, but they were strong, steady, and useful for years. Their value came from everything they made possible. Without enough traction, fields could be prepared late or poorly. Late sowing could reduce yields. Reduced yields could mean hunger or debt. Owning an ox was rarely simple, so neighbors might share animals in a plow team. That cooperation tied households together through schedules, trust, and necessity. If an ox fell ill, the loss could spread beyond one family. It might disrupt the work of several. This is why livestock wealth mattered so deeply. In a world where power came from muscle, a patient animal could be more important than furniture, clothing, or the walls around a bed. A village plow team could bind neighbors together for life. Heavy plowing often required more animals than one poor household could provide. That need created partnerships. Several families might combine oxen, tools, time, and labor to turn the soil properly. Such cooperation was practical, but it also shaped relationships. People had to agree on timing. They had to trust one another's animals. They had to maintain equipment and settle resentment when one person seemed to benefit more than another. A broken yoke or a sick beast could become a shared problem. So could bad weather. When the ground was ready, delay mattered. This made the plow team a social bond as well as a farming arrangement. It linked households through dependence that could last for decades. We often imagine medieval peasants as isolated laborers bent over fields, but much of their work required coordination. Survival was not only about strength. It was about belonging to a network that could pull together when the soil demanded it. Harvest time turned the whole village into a working machine. When grain ripened, the pace of life changed. There was no room for delay, because rain, wind, birds, and rot could destroy what months of labor had grown. Men, women, children, servants, and hired workers all had roles. Some cut with sickles or scythes. Others gathered, bound, carried, stacked, or guarded. Meals had to be prepared for people who could not spare long hours away from the fields. Animals had to be managed, tools sharpened, and carts loaded. The work was exhausting, but it also carried a fierce communal energy. The harvest decided food, rent, seed, and survival. It could bring relief or fear. It could expose who had enough help and who did not. Songs, shared meals, and customs sometimes softened the strain, but the urgency remained. For a few crucial weeks, the village became almost one body, moving under the same pressure, trying to capture the year before it slipped away. Women often brewed ale as part of ordinary household labor. Ale was not only a drink. It was a household product, a source of nourishment, and sometimes a small business. Brewing often belonged to women's work because it grew naturally from domestic tasks. Grain had to be malted, water heated, mash managed, and fermentation watched with care. The result could be consumed at home or sold locally. In many communities, women who sold ale were known as alewives, and their work placed them in the small economy of the village. This could bring income, but it also brought scrutiny. Local officers might test quality, measure prices, or find dishonest measures. Brewing required knowledge that was practical and precise. Too weak, and customers complained. Spoiled, and money was lost. Strong enough, and it became valuable. The brewhouse was therefore a place where skill met survival. For some women, ale offered one of the few ways to turn household labor into public trade. Ale was safer than many water sources in busy settlements. Medieval people did drink water, especially from clean wells, springs, and streams. Still, in crowded places, water could be risky. Waste, animals, runoff, and poor drainage could foul supplies, even when people did not understand microbes in the modern sense. Ale offered an advantage. Brewing involved boiling or heating water, and fermentation made the drink less friendly to some harmful organisms. It was often weaker than modern beer, which meant people could drink it through the day without the same effect we might imagine. For laborers, it also supplied calories. This made ale practical rather than merely recreational. A jug could belong at breakfast, in the field, or beside a simple evening meal. Children might drink very weak versions. The important point is not that everyone feared water at every moment. The truth is more interesting. People learned through experience that certain prepared drinks kept better, nourished better, and were often more dependable than a questionable source nearby. Pottage was the steady meal at the heart of peasant life. In a pot over the hearth, a meal could slowly become whatever the household had available. Pottage might contain grains, peas, beans, onions, leeks, herbs, greens, or scraps of meat, when fortune allowed. Its strength was flexibility. It could be stretched when food was short, thickened when stores were better, and kept warm for people returning from work at different times. Unlike the neat courses of elite dining, this was food built around need. It filled the body and used ingredients that could be grown in gardens or stored through colder months. The same pot might change through the week as new pieces were added. That makes it sound humble, but it was central to survival. The hearth was not only a cooking place, it was the engine of the home. A simmering meal meant warmth, planning, and continuity. In a hard season, the difference between a thin pottage and a thick one could feel enormous. Meat was rare for many peasants outside festivals and feasts. For many rural families, animals were too useful to be eaten casually. A cow could give milk. A hen could lay eggs. A pig could become a major store of food, but only after months of feeding. Slaughter was therefore a decision, not a convenience. Meat appeared more often at special moments, when religious celebration, community custom, or seasonal necessity made it possible. Preserving also mattered. Salted pork or smoked meat could help carry a household through lean months, but salt cost money, and storage required care. Hunting large game was often restricted, especially where forest law protected elite privilege. So everyday protein usually came from humbler sources. Dairy, eggs, legumes, and occasional fish did much of the work. This makes feast meat more meaningful. It was not just flavor. It marked occasion, status, and relief from routine. When a family tasted a richer meal, they were also tasting time, planning, and the rare permission to enjoy surplus. Fish days shaped diets across much of medieval Christian Europe. For many rural households, religion reached straight into the cooking pot. The church marked certain days when eating meat from land animals was forbidden, and this changed what people planned, bought, preserved, and served. Fish became more than a food. It became part of the rhythm of devotion. Coastal communities had access to fresh catches, but inland villages often relied on salted, dried, smoked, or pickled fish that could travel. Herring was especially important because it was cheap, durable, and widely traded. Even a family far from the sea might taste the ocean through a barreled fish bought at market. These rules also supported whole industries. Fishermen, merchants, salters, boat owners, and market sellers all benefited from religious demand. For peasants, the result was practical as well as spiritual. A meal could express obedience, necessity, and geography at once. Something as ordinary as supper became a reminder that faith did not only live in church. It entered the stomach. Peasants used herbs because medicine was local, practical, and expensive. Healing often began with what could be grown, gathered, dried, or traded nearby. A village family might turn to sage, yarrow, mint, plantain, elder, or comfrey because learned physicians were distant and costly. This did not mean rural medicine was simple-minded. People carried a deep store of observation. They knew which leaves soothed bites, which plants eased stomach trouble, and which preparations were used after childbirth or injury. Much of this knowledge moved through women, neighbors, midwives, monks, and local healers. Remedies might sit beside prayer, confession, charms, and pilgrimage, because medieval people did not divide body and soul in the way modern medicine often does. A poultice could be applied while a saint was invoked. A syrup could be swallowed after a blessing. Some treatments helped. Others did little. Some were dangerous. Yet the world of household healing shows a hard truth. When professional care was beyond reach, survival depended on memory, plants, and the trusted hands nearby. Illness could send a household into debt within days. A sick worker could disturb everything. In a farming household, strength was not separate from wealth. It was wealth. If an adult could not reap, dig, carry, milk, spin, brew, or tend animals, the loss was immediate. Work still had to be done, and obligations did not wait politely at the door. A family might need to hire help, borrow grain, sell stored goods, or promise future payment to a neighbor. If an animal needed care at the same time, the pressure grew sharper. Illness also brought costs that were not always medical in the modern sense. Someone had to fetch herbs, visit a shrine, pay an offering, or seek advice from a local practitioner. A short fever could therefore become a financial event. A long sickness could reshape inheritance, marriage prospects, and tenancy. This is why health was never private. It belonged to the whole household. One failing body could pull an entire family toward danger. Some peasants were forced to serve the Lord, and they were called serfs. But they could escape this destiny by surviving a year in town. Freedom could sometimes be reached by walking away, but the risk was enormous. In parts of medieval Europe, a serf who lived in a chartered town for a year and a day without being reclaimed might gain freedom from former obligations. This rule did not make escape easy. Leaving meant abandoning familiar fields, family ties, and the protection of custom. A runaway also needed work, shelter, food, and luck. Town life was crowded and dangerous in its own ways. Disease spread quickly, and newcomers could be exploited. Yet the possibility mattered. It showed that medieval society was not completely frozen. Towns offered wages, trades, markets, and legal identities that could weaken old bonds. For a person tied to labor services, that promise must have felt powerful. The road to town was not just a road across land. It could be a passage between two kinds of life, one inherited and one painfully won. A cottage hearth was the warm center of family survival. The fire inside a peasant home did far more than give comfort. It cooked meals, heated water, dried damp clothing, hardened simple repairs, and helped preserve food through smoke and warmth. Around it, people worked through the darker parts of the year. Someone might mend a shoe while another spun thread. Children listened to stories while stew thickened in the pot. Ash had uses too. It could help with cleaning, soap making, and managing waste. Keeping a fire alive required planning. Fuel had to be gathered, cut, stored, and protected from rain. In areas where wood was scarce or rights were limited, even warmth depended on access and permission. The hearth also shaped the structure of the home. Light, heat, and smoke all spread from that point. To let the fire fail at the wrong moment was more than inconvenience. It meant cold food, cold hands, and another task before dawn. Home began where the flame was kept. Peasant clothing was patched again and again before being discarded. Cloth represented time, labor, and cost. A garment might begin as wool from a sheep, then pass through washing, carding, spinning, weaving, cutting, sewing, and fitting before anyone wore it. Every stage required skill. That made clothing too valuable to throw away just because it tore. A sleeve could be mended. The hem could be turned. A worn tunic could become a child's garment, then a rag, then stuffing, then tinder or binding. Patches did not always mean shame. They often meant care. People judged cloth by durability and usefulness, not novelty. The poorest might wear coarse fabrics with repeated repairs, while better-off villagers could afford stronger dye, finer weave, or more layers. Clothing also carried social information. It showed work, status, season, and sometimes legal restriction. To mend a garment was to preserve stored labor. Each stitch saved money, extended usefulness, and kept a body protected from weather. Nothing soft came cheaply. Wool was the fabric that warmed much of rural Europe. Across many regions, sheep shaped the texture of everyday life. Their fleece became cloaks, tunics, hose, blankets, caps, and bedding. Wool kept warmth even when damp, which made it valuable in climates where rain and cold could creep into every task. It could be spun into different grades, from rough cloth for laborers to finer textiles for those who could pay. Producing it linked countryside and town. Peasants might raise sheep, shear them, spin at home, or sell fleece into wider markets. Women's spinning was especially important because thread was needed constantly and took enormous time. Dyes could add color, but undyed shades of brown, gray, cream, and black were common among poorer households. Wool also connected ordinary people to international trade, especially in places where cloth industries became wealthy. A simple peasant hood might therefore belong to a much larger story. Behind its warmth stood pasture, animal care, handwork, commerce, and weather. Shoes wore out quickly on mud, stone, frost, and fields. Footwear was one of the most practical possessions a working person owned. Many shoes were made from leather, shaped simply, and repaired as long as possible. Constant walking punished them. Fields sucked at soles. Roads cut them with stones. Wet weather softened leather. Frost stiffened it. A person who worked outdoors could wear through footwear faster than they could comfortably replace it. Going barefoot was possible in some seasons and places, but it exposed feet to injury, cold, parasites, and infection. Better shoes gave protection, yet they also required money or access to a cobbler. Wooden pattens could lift feet above mud in towns, while rural laborers depended on sturdier, everyday solutions. The state of someone's shoes could reveal poverty very quickly. A torn sole was not a fashion problem. It was pain measured step by step. For peasants who walked to fields, markets, church and mills, survival often began at ground level. Children began helping with small tasks astonishingly early in life. Work entered childhood gradually, not as a single dramatic moment. A very young child might scare birds from fields, gather kindling, fetch water, watch geese, carry messages, or help sort simple produce. These tasks taught responsibility before full strength arrived. They also allowed adults to keep doing heavier work. In a household with little spare labor, even small hands mattered. Play still existed. Children made games from stones, sticks, animals, songs, and imitation. Yet play often sat near work because children learned by watching. They saw how to handle tools, judge animals, prepare food, and behave before neighbors. Mistakes could be costly, so experience began early. This does not mean every child's life was grim. It means childhood was woven into the household economy from the beginning. A child chasing crows from seed was not only passing time, they were protecting future bread. In that world, growing up meant becoming useful before becoming independent. Childhood could be brief because work arrived before adulthood. Medieval society did recognize childhood, but the boundary between child and worker came much sooner than many people expect today. By the age when modern children are still in primary school, rural youngsters might already have regular duties. By adolescence, many were doing serious labor. Some left home as servants, apprentices, or hired helpers, depending on region and opportunity. This early responsibility came from necessity. A farm household needed bodies that could contribute. It also came from a world where training happened through doing. A teenager who could plow, milk, spin, bake, carry, bargain, or manage animals was moving toward adult usefulness. The emotional life of children is harder to recover from records, but the demands around them are clear. They lived in a culture where dependence shortened quickly. To grow was to be folded into work, expectation, and duty. The astonishing thing is not that they helped. It is how soon they were trusted with tasks that mattered. Many children learned farming skills long before they learned letters. For peasant families, knowledge was usually practical before it was written. A child might learn the feel of good soil, the sound of a sick animal, the right depth for seed, or the danger of leaving a gate open long before learning to read a page. Literacy was limited in many rural communities, especially among poorer households, because schooling required time, money, access, and a reason. The church and some towns offered routes into letters, but most village children received their education through work. Their lessons were repeated in barns, fields, kitchens, lanes, and byres. This kind of learning could be exacting. A child had to notice weather, remember boundaries, follow seasonal routines, and understand tools by hand. It was not ignorance. It was another kind of literacy, written in landscape and labor. A boy or girl who could not read Latin might still know the land well enough to help keep a family alive. Most peasants were illiterate, but they understood signs and symbols. A person who could not read a manuscript was not living in a meaningless world. Medieval villages were full of visual and spoken codes. Church images told sacred stories through painted walls, carved figures, gestures, colors, and repeated scenes. Heraldic signs could identify authority. Tavern signs, market marks, seals, badges, and symbols helped people navigate social life. Memory carried law, family history, boundaries, agreements, and songs. Public reading also mattered. A priest, clerk, or official could speak written words aloud, turning documents into communal knowledge. This created a culture where text held power, but understanding did not depend only on private reading. People recognized saints by attributes, trades by tools, and warnings by custom. They knew when bells called them and when a mark on goods mattered. Illiteracy limited access to certain forms of power, especially law and administration. Yet peasant minds were trained to read faces, fields, rituals, and images with practical intelligence. Church bells measured time before most villages had clocks. In a world without personal watches, sound organized the day. Bells called people to prayer, marked services, announced deaths, warned of danger, and signaled moments that mattered to the community. Their reach turned the parish into an audible landscape. A farmer in a field might hear a bell across the air and know that a duty, service, or change of activity was near. Monastic hours influenced wider habits, even when villagers did not follow them precisely. The bell did not divide time into minutes as we do. It shaped time into meaningful moments. Morning, worship, curfew, feast, alarm, and mourning could all be carried by metal struck above the village. This made the church tower more than a building. It was a public voice. The sound gave structure to people who measured life by daylight and season. Before mechanical time ruled daily existence, time arrived through ringing, echoing across fields and roofs. Sundays offered worship, news, rest, and social life together. The weekly holy day was one of the great anchors of village existence. People gathered at church not only for worship, but also to see one another, hear announcements, notice changes, and take part in community life. A priest might deliver religious instruction. Local matters might be discussed before or after service. News from beyond the village could pass from mouth to mouth. For laboring families, the pause from ordinary fieldwork had enormous value. It allowed bodies to recover, clothing to be seen, marriages to be noticed, disputes to simmer or soften, and friendships to be maintained. Of course, animals still needed care, and meals still had to be prepared. Rest was never complete idleness. Yet the day stood apart. It reminded people that time belonged to God as well as to labor. In a life shaped by obligation, this repeated interruption mattered. It gave the village a shared heartbeat once each week. Holy days gave peasants precious breaks from ordinary labor. The medieval year contained many religious observances that interrupted routine work. Some were solemn. Others became moments of food, play, visiting, music, and release from pressure. These days were not modern holidays in every sense. They were tied to saints, feasts, penance, fasting, and worship. Yet for peasants, they also created rare breathing space in a demanding year. A holy day could mean attending church in the morning, then joining neighbors in customs that blended devotion with enjoyment. Such pauses helped people endure. They also reinforced a shared calendar that everyone recognized. The lord, the priest, the tenant, and the servant might all acknowledge the same sacred date, even if their experiences differed. These breaks could frustrate employers who wanted more labor, but they were embedded in religious life. For ordinary villagers, sacred time did something powerful. It placed limits on work. It told even the poorest laborer that not every day belonged to the fields. Festivals could fill a village with games, songs, and food. At certain times, the ordinary pattern of work opened into celebration. A feast day, wedding, harvest gathering, or seasonal custom could transform the village atmosphere. People might play rough sports, dance in groups, share special dishes, drink more than usual, or watch informal performances. These occasions mattered because pleasure itself was valuable in a hard life. Celebration created memory. It allowed courtship, laughter, rivalry, and display. A young person could be noticed. A household could show generosity. A quarrel could flare after too much ale. Authority often watched these moments carefully because gatherings could become disorderly. Still, festivals were not simply escape. They helped hold communities together. Shared enjoyment confirmed that people belonged to one another, even when daily life produced tension. The same neighbors who argued over animals or fences might sing beside each other at a feast. For a short time, scarcity loosened its grip. The village remembered that survival also needed joy. Dancing was one of the great pleasures of peasant communities. Movement to music offered something that hard labor could not. It turned bodies tired by work into bodies capable of rhythm, display, and delight. Medieval authorities sometimes worried about dancing, especially when it happened near churches, at night, or during festivals that might encourage flirtation and disorder. That concern tells us how powerful it was. Dances could draw young people together, mark seasonal celebrations, and make public space feel alive. The music might come from a pipe, drum, fiddle, or voice. The steps did not need elite refinement to matter. They needed energy and recognition. People who owned little could still participate with their bodies. Dancing also created chances to see and be seen. Courtship, humor, confidence, and community identity could all move through the same circle. In a world where many pleasures were simple and local, dance gave ordinary villagers a kind of richness no landlord could fully control. For a while, the body belonged to celebration. Weddings were public events that joined families, neighbors, and land. Marriage was never only about two people. It changed households, property arrangements, labor expectations, alliances, and future inheritance. A wedding brought those changes into public view. The community mattered because everyone needed to know who had joined whom, what promises had been made, and which families were now connected. The ceremony might involve church blessing, public vows, feasting, gifts, and local customs. Even modest celebrations carried weight. A union could bring access to land, tools, animals, dowry goods, or useful kin. It could also settle tensions or create new ones. Neighbors watched because marriage affected the village economy. A new couple might take over a holding, move into service, or add working strength to a family. The public nature of the event protected memory. In a society where documents were not always central to peasant life, witnesses mattered. A wedding was therefore a social announcement. It told the village that the future had been rearranged. Marriage often depended on property, permission, timing, and survival. Romance existed, but it did not stand alone. For many peasants, choosing a spouse involved practical questions that could not be ignored. Could the couple support themselves? Was their land, a place to live, or work enough to maintain a household? Were parents, lords, or local customs involved in granting approval? In some areas, unfree tenants owed fees or needed permission before marriage, especially if a match affected labor or inheritance. Timing mattered too. A wedding before harvest, after a death, or during economic strain could change its meaning. The church emphasized consent, which gave marriage a spiritual and legal form beyond family bargaining. Yet daily survival remained central. A good marriage brought labor, skill, fertility, reputation, and alliance into one household. The poor match could threaten both families. This makes peasant marriage more dramatic than simple village romance. It was a personal bond formed inside a hard calculation about food, work, status, and the future. A peasant household could include servants who were not relatives. The medieval household was often wider than the modern nuclear family. Young people might leave their birth homes to work in another household as servants, especially during adolescence or early adulthood. They could help with cooking, herding, cleaning, field labor, childcare, spinning, animal care, or errands. Service gave them food, lodging, experience, and sometimes wages. It also taught skills needed for future marriage or independent work. For the employing household, servants added labor at crucial times. The relationship could be protective, exploitative, affectionate, tense, or all of these at once. A servant lived under another family's roof, which meant close observation and limited freedom. Yet service could also open possibilities beyond one's own cottage. It created connections between households and moved young people through the village economy. This reminds us that home was not always defined by blood. It was defined by work, authority, dependence, and shared daily routine under one roof. Widows sometimes managed farms with surprising authority and skill. The death of a husband could leave a woman vulnerable, but it could also place her in a position of recognized responsibility. Depending on local law and custom, a widow might hold land, run a household, manage servants, pay rents, sell produce, appear in court, and negotiate with neighbors. Her authority came from necessity as well as right. Animals still needed feeding. Fields still needed decisions. Children still needed protection. Some widows remarried quickly because labor and security mattered. Others remained independent for years, especially if they had resources or adult children. Records sometimes show widows defending property, settling debts, and taking part in the small business of village life. This challenges the idea that rural women were always hidden behind men. Their power was uneven and often fragile, but it could be real. A widow who knew accounts, animals, brewing, storage, and local custom could hold a farm together. Her survival depended on competence that neighbors could not ignore. Village women worked in fields as well as inside homes. The division between outdoor and indoor labor was never as neat as later stereotypes suggest. Women weeded, gleaned, spread manure, helped with haymaking, tended animals, harvested crops, and carried goods to market. Inside the home, they cooked, brewed, spun, mended, managed children, and kept stores in order. The burden could be intense because these tasks did not replace one another. They piled up. During harvest, women's field labor was especially important. During winter, textile work could fill long hours near the hearth. Their work often appeared less clearly in official records because men were more commonly named in certain legal and landholding contexts. Yet rural survival depended on women's labor at every level. A household without it was weakened. To imagine peasant women only beside a cooking pot is to miss much of the village economy. They moved between field, home, market, and church, carrying a workload that was essential, skilled, and often underestimated. Spinning thread was constant labor hidden inside ordinary evenings. Before cloth could exist, thread had to be made. That task consumed an astonishing amount of time. Women and girls often spun wool, flax, or other fibers whenever hands were free. A spindle could be carried, used near the fire, worked while watching children, or taken during pauses in other duties. Later, spinning wheels improved speed in many places, but the demand remained huge. Every garment, sheet, blanket, cord, and piece of linen began with fiber transformed by patient movement. This labor was so ordinary that it could become almost invisible, yet it underpinned the textile economy. A household needed thread for its own use, and some families produced extra for sale. The distaff and spindle became familiar signs of women's work because they were always present. Spinning was not dramatic like harvest, but its scale is breathtaking. An evening that looks restful from a distance might actually contain hundreds of small motions turning fleece into future clothing. The distaff became a symbol of women's everyday work. A distaff held unspun fibers ready to be drawn into thread, and its meaning grew far beyond the object itself. In images, sayings, and social language, it came to represent female labor, domestic responsibility, and the expected skills of women. The phrase distaff side later referred to the female line of a family, which shows how deeply the tool entered cultural thought. For peasant women, the object was practical before it was symbolic. It kept fibers organized while hands worked with spindle or wheel. Yet its cultural power matters because it tells us what society noticed. Women's work was associated with continuity, production, and household order. The distaff could suggest diligence, but it could also be used in jokes or criticism when women stepped outside expected roles. A simple tool therefore carried the weight of gender. It stood for hours of real labor, but also for the rules that tried to define who should perform it. Peasants paid tithes that supported the local church and clergy. Religious obligation had a material form. Many households owed a tenth of certain produce or income to the church, though practice varied by place and period. Grain, lambs, wool, hay, eggs, or other goods might be collected as tithe. For a peasant family, this could feel heavy because it came from the same stores needed for survival. Yet the tithe helped maintain the parish system that shaped daily life. It supported clergy, church buildings, rituals, poor relief in some cases, and the spiritual services people believed were necessary. Tension was common. People could resent unfair collection, argue over what was owed, or hide produce. At the same time, refusing religious duty carried moral danger. The tithe shows how faith and economy were joined. A stack of grain was not only food or rent. It could also be an offering. The church was not a distant idea. It stood in the barn, measuring part of the harvest. Confession shaped how many peasants understood guilt and forgiveness. The medieval church taught that sin was serious, but not hopeless. Confession offered a structured way to name wrongdoing, receive penance, and seek absolution. For peasants, this practice brought private conscience into a public religious system. A person might confess anger, theft, sexual misconduct, broken promises, neglect of duty, or failures in worship. The priest became a guide, judge, and mediator. Penance could involve prayers, fasting, restitution, or pilgrimage, depending on the offense and circumstance. This shaped how people thought about responsibility. Wrongdoing was not merely a social problem. It affected the soul. Yet forgiveness was available through proper channels. That combination gave confession enormous emotional power. It could comfort the anxious and discipline the rebellious. It could also place villagers under clerical authority in intimate matters. In a world where misfortune was often read spiritually, confession helped people make sense of fear. It offered a path back from guilt, one spoken admission at a time. Saints offered comfort for sickness, animals, weather, and childbirth. Medieval devotion was often intensely practical. People turned to holy figures for help with the dangers that surrounded them every day. A saint might be known for protecting livestock, easing fever, guarding mothers in labor, or defending fields from storms. This did not feel like superstition at the edges of religion. It was woven into ordinary faith. A villager might pray before an image, light a candle, make a vow, visit a shrine, or name a child after a revered protector. The relationship could feel personal. Saints were imagined as powerful intercessors who understood specific human troubles. This mattered in a world where disease, hunger, and sudden loss were always near. If a cow sickened or a baby struggled to live, Prayer offered action when other tools were limited. These devotions also connected small villages to famous shrines and wider religious stories. Through saints, ordinary people could feel that heaven noticed the details of their lives. Pilgrimage could carry ordinary villagers far beyond familiar roads. A journey to a shrine offered something rare for a peasant. It could take a person outside the narrow circle of fields, neighbors, and parish life. Some pilgrimages were local, while others led to famous destinations that might take days or weeks to reach. The reasons varied. A person might seek healing, give thanks, fulfill penance, honor a saint, or ask for protection. Along the way, pilgrims encountered inns, bridges, towns, relics, markets, strangers, and stories. Travel was not easy. Roads could be dangerous, money could run short, and leaving work behind required planning. Yet the journey carried spiritual prestige. Badges bought at shrines could be worn as proof of devotion and adventure. For someone whose life was usually tied to one village, pilgrimage changed the scale of the world. It made holiness something that could be walked toward. Each mile became a form of prayer, and each road opened a wider map of medieval life. Relics drew peasants into a world of wonder and hope. A bone fragment, a piece of cloth, or an object linked to a saint could transform a church into a place of extraordinary power. To medieval believers, these were not museum pieces. They were physical connections to holiness. People traveled to see them, touched containers that held them, prayed near them, and sometimes believed healing could come through them. For a peasant whose life was full of danger, a relic offered something more immediate than distant theology. It made the sacred feel close enough to stand before. Great churches could build fame and wealth around famous relics, but even smaller communities treasured local holy objects. Their presence could bring visitors, gifts, reputation, and pride. It also gave ordinary people a way to approach problems that seemed beyond human control. A sick child, a troubled harvest, or a frightening dream might send someone toward the shrine. In that moment, history, faith, and need met inside a single object. Church wall paintings told stories to people who could not read. Inside many parish churches, the walls themselves became lessons. Paintings showed scenes from Scripture, the lives of saints, the dangers of sin, and the hope of salvation. These images mattered because most villagers did not learn religion by reading books alone. They learned by hearing sermons, repeating prayers, attending rituals, and looking at pictures that surrounded them week after week. A painted devil, a crowned saint, or a wounded martyr could stay in memory more strongly than a written line. Some images warned, others comforted. Many helped people recognize stories they had heard aloud. Color carried meaning, and familiar poses made figures identifiable. The building became a kind of visual classroom. Even children could absorb its message before they understood formal teaching. For a rural congregation, painted walls turned belief into something visible. The church did not simply contain worship. It taught through every surface, reminding villagers that the unseen world was watching the visible one. The seasons decided when peasants rested, planted, feared, and celebrated. Modern life can soften the force of the year, but medieval rural life could not ignore it. The changing season decided what work was possible and what dangers were near. People did not simply notice spring or winter. They reorganized life around them. A late thaw could delay preparation. A dry spell could make seedlings fail. A warm stretch could promise growth while hiding future risk. The year was not a smooth circle. It was a series of tests. Each season brought different labor, different food, different fears, and different chances for relief. Even mood could follow the land. Hope might rise when shoots appeared. Anxiety could sharpen when clouds gathered at the wrong time. Celebration often came when the body and fields had earned it. The calendar was therefore emotional as well as practical. Peasants lived inside time in a very physical way. They felt the year through hunger, weather, daylight, and the weight of work. Winter could be quieter, but hunger often made it dangerous. The cold months reduced some field labor, but they did not bring easy comfort. Stored grain had to last. Hay had to feed animals. Fuel had to be managed carefully. If autumn supplies were thin, winter became a long calculation. Every meal raised the same question. Would enough remain before new food appeared? Families might eat poorer bread, thinner stews, or preserved foods that had to be stretched beyond comfort. Animals added another worry. Keeping too many meant running out of fodder. Slaughtering too many meant losing future strength or produce. Illness spread more easily when people crowded indoors and bodies weakened. Travel became harder, markets less dependable, and repairs more urgent. Yet winter also had its own forms of labor. Tools were fixed, fibers were worked, and plans were made for the coming year. The danger lay in waiting. Nothing in the fields could be hurried. Peasants had to endure until the land became generous again. Spring brought hope, mud, lambing, sowing, and exhausting work. The return of growth was not a soft beginning. It was a rush. Fields needed preparation. Seed had to go into the ground at the right moment. Animals gave birth, and weak newborns demanded attention at all hours. Mud slowed carts, clung to shoes, and turned paths into labor. Stored food from the previous year might be nearly gone, which made this hopeful season one of the leanest. People could see life returning while still feeling hunger in the body. That contrast made spring powerful. It asked for faith in the future before the future had produced anything edible. A lamb surviving the night mattered. A seedbed prepared in time mattered. A tool repaired before use mattered. Every task felt connected to the months ahead. Spring was not simply renewal. It was risk under a brighter sky. The village moved from endurance into action, carrying the last weakness of winter into the first demands of growth. Summer demanded long hours under heat, dust, and uncertainty. Long daylight did not mean leisure. It meant the day could hold more work. Hay had to be cut and dried when weather allowed. Weeds had to be controlled before they stole strength from crops. Animals needed watching. Repairs could not wait. The sun could ripen grain, but too much heat could harden ground or strain bodies already worn by labor. Dust rose from roads and fields. Sweat carried salt from people who could not simply stop. Summer also carried suspense. A good-looking crop was not safe until it was gathered. Storms, pests, and sudden disease could still turn promise into loss. The work demanded speed without certainty. People watched the sky with the attention of gamblers, because the stakes were food and rent. Even beauty had pressure inside it. Golden fields could look abundant, but they were also fragile. Summer asked peasants to work at full strength, while knowing that nature still held the final decision. Autumn was the season of abundance, anxiety, and judgment. After the most urgent gathering, a village could finally see what the year had produced. Stores were measured. Debts were faced. Seed grain was set aside. Animals were assessed before colder months. This season carried relief, but it also revealed truth. A household that seemed secure in summer might discover that the yield was too small. A family with good stores might breathe more easily. Rents, dues, and tithes came into sharper focus once produce was visible. Autumn also shaped social comparison. Everyone could see who had plenty, who had borrowed, who had lost animals, and who might need help. Decisions made now reached deep into winter. Which pig should be fattened? Which beast could be kept? Which grain must be saved and not eaten? The air might smell of apples, straw, and smoke, but underneath was arithmetic. Autumn judged the labor of the year. It told every household how much safety they had earned and how much danger remained. The village common gave poor families grazing, firewood, and survival. Shared land could be the difference between bare existence and collapse. Common rights allowed villagers to use certain resources that they could not afford privately. A family with little land might graze a cow, gather fallen branches, cut turf, collect bedding materials, or feed geese where custom allowed. These rights were carefully defined and often fiercely defended. They were not casual generosity. They belonged to the structure of village life. For poorer households, the common could turn a small holding into something livable. Without it, an animal might be impossible to keep. Without an animal, manure, milk, or future income could disappear. This made common land valuable far beyond its appearance. A scrubby patch, a rough pasture, or a stretch of woodland edge could hold a family's margin of safety. When access was challenged, anger could grow quickly. People were not merely defending open space. They were defending the hidden resources that kept hunger from crossing the threshold. Rights to gather wood could mean warmth through winter. Not every tree was free for the taking. Woodland was often controlled, and villagers depended on customary rights to collect fallen branches, cut small growth, or gather fuel in particular ways. This mattered because fuel touched every part of home life. It cooked food, warmed bodies, heated water, supported small crafts, and helped dry damp materials. A household without enough wood faced discomfort that could become dangerous. The rules could be detailed. Some people could gather dead wood, but not cut living branches. Others had access only at certain times. Breaking these rules risked fines, but cold pushed people toward temptation. Woodland therefore became a place of negotiation between need and authority. A bundle of sticks might look humble, yet it carried legal and economic meaning. It represented access to heat itself. When winter nights lengthened, the right to gather fuel was not a minor privilege. It was one of the quiet foundations of survival. Pigs were driven into woodland to fatten on acorns. In autumn, wooded land could become a feeding ground. Swineherds took pigs beneath oak and beech trees so they could gorge on fallen nuts. This practice helped families turn woodland abundance into meat and fat without spending precious grain. The animals rooted through leaves, growing heavier on food that humans could not always use directly. The right to do this was often regulated, and fees could be charged. That shows how valuable it was. A pig fed on woodland mast could become salted pork, lard, sausage, or feast food later in the year. It was a living storehouse converting forest litter into calories. The scene also reveals how integrated medieval farming was with the wider landscape. Fields, woods, animals, and household stores all belonged to one system. A good mast year could improve winter prospects. A poor one could reduce the weight of pigs and the confidence of families. Even acorns could alter the mood of a village. Bees gave medieval peasants honey, wax, and valuable sweetness. Before cheap sugar became common, honey held special importance. It sweetened food and drink, soothed throats, and could be used in preserving or brewing. Beeswax was equally valuable. It made candles that burned cleaner than rushlights or tallow, which mattered especially in churches and wealthier households. Some peasants kept skeps, the traditional beehives made from straw or other materials. Managing bees required patience and courage. A keeper needed to understand swarming, protect hives from weather, and harvest without destroying more than necessary. The reward was concentrated value from a small corner of land. A pot of honey was not just a treat. It was trade, medicine, celebration, and status in one golden substance. Bees also helped fruit trees and garden plants, even if medieval people did not explain pollination in modern terms. They could observe results. A hive near a home brought sweetness, light, and a faint sense that tiny workers were laboring beside the family. Gardens supplied onions, leeks, beans, herbs, and quiet resilience. Beside cottages and within small enclosed plots, gardens carried a different kind of importance from great fields. Grain fed the household in bulk, but garden crops added flavor, protein, medicine, and variety. These plots could be tended in smaller moments around other duties. They allowed families to grow foods that did not require the same communal structure as open fields. Beans and peas helped fill stomachs. Onions and leeks made simple meals more sustaining. Herbs served the cooking pot and the sickbed. A well-kept garden also gave women and children space for useful labor close to home. Its produce might be eaten fresh, dried, stored, or sold in small amounts. The garden was a place where careful attention could produce meaningful returns. It softened dependence on the main harvest. When grain was limited, a patch of greens or legumes could matter deeply. In a world of large uncertainties, the small garden offered a measure of control. Medieval peasants feared bad weather more than distant kings. A ruler might shape taxes, wars, and laws, but a storm could decide dinner. For rural families, the most immediate power often came from the sky. Hail could flatten grain. Too much rain could rot hay. Drought could stunt crops. A cold snap could kill blossoms before fruit formed. The danger was personal and direct. It entered barns, stomachs, and debts. Peasants may have heard royal names in church announcements or market rumors, but weather was the authority they met every morning. It decided whether paths were passable, whether animals thrived, whether seed took root, and whether labor succeeded. This did not make politics irrelevant. It simply placed nature closer. A king's command traveled through officials. Weather arrived without warning. People prayed, watched signs, remembered past seasons, and tried to prepare, but they could not negotiate with clouds. In the countryside, power was not only held in castles. It moved through wind, rain, heat, and frost. A heavy rainstorm could ruin months of careful labor. Rain was needed, but timing was everything. A downpour after sowing could wash seed from the ground. Rain during haymaking could turn valuable fodder into rot. Rain at harvest could flatten grain, sprout kernels before cutting, or make sheaves too damp to store safely. The cruel part was how quickly it happened. Months of plowing, sowing, weeding, and watching could be undone by weather that lasted only a short while. Wet crops were not merely inconvenient. Stored damp grain could mold, heat, spoil, and become dangerous to eat. Families might try to dry sheaves in brief, clear spells, but every delay increased risk. A storm also made roads worse, slowed carts, and kept workers from moving efficiently. This created a race against sky and soil. Medieval peasants lived with the knowledge that labor alone did not guarantee reward. A field could look like success in the morning and become a warning by nightfall. Frost at the wrong moment could destroy an entire crop. Cold was not always the enemy. Winter frost could harden roads and help control pests. The danger came when freezing weather arrived after growth had begun. Young shoots, blossoms, and tender leaves could be damaged in a single night. A vineyard, orchard, or grain field might lose much of its promise before anyone could act. To medieval farmers, frost was especially frightening because it could strike under a clear sky that looked harmless. People might wake to pale fields and understand that future food had already been reduced. The damage could reach beyond one crop. If fruit failed, there was less for eating, preserving, selling, or making drink. If young grain suffered, rents and seed stores could be threatened. There were few defenses. Smoke, prayers, local customs, and careful site selection offered limited comfort. A late frost showed how vulnerable the year truly was. It could turn spring from hope into warning before breakfast. Grain storage was a battle against damp, rats, and mold. Growing food was only half the struggle. Keeping it edible could be just as important. Grain had to be dried properly, stored away from moisture, guarded from rodents, and checked for spoilage. A poor storage place could waste the success of a good harvest. Rats and mice gnawed through sacks, fouled supplies, and multiplied quickly near food. Damp grain could rot or develop mold. In some cases, contaminated grain brought illness. Households used chests, bins, lofts, barns, raised floors, cats, traps, and constant vigilance. Every measure aimed to protect the future. Seed grain needed special care because eating it solved today's hunger while creating tomorrow's disaster. Storage also affected power. Those with larger barns and safer buildings had more control over scarcity. Those with fragile stores lived closer to panic. A heap of grain was not passive. It was under siege from weather, animals, insects, and hunger. Guarding it was a daily act of survival. The manorial court judged gossip, debt, fences, and stolen animals. Local justice often happened close to home. The manorial court dealt with the everyday disputes and offenses that shaped village life. It could record unpaid dues, broken agreements, damaged boundaries, brewing offenses, quarrels, inheritance transfers, stray livestock, and failures of duty. This court was not distant, like royal justice. It involved neighbors, local officers, customs, and memory. People who knew one another appeared in front of people who knew the story already, or thought they did. That made the process intimate and tense. A loose fence might sound minor, but if animals entered a crop, the loss mattered. A rumor could affect reputation. A debt could shape trust. Court records show the village as a place of constant negotiation, not simple harmony. They also reveal that ordinary people used law to defend themselves. A peasant might complain, testify, pay a fine, or challenge a claim. Justice was part of rural routine, woven into work as surely as ploughing. Villagers could be fined for brewing weak or dishonest ale. Ale selling was regulated because customers depended on fair measures and reliable quality. Local officials known as ale tasters could inspect brewers and report offences. A drink that was too weak, spoiled, overpriced, or sold in false measures could bring a fine. This tells us that village markets were not lawless exchanges. They were watched through custom and local authority. Brewing was common enough that regulation became necessary, and women were often visible in these records because they frequently brewed for sale. The rules protected buyers, but they also produced income through penalties. A household trying to earn a little extra might therefore face real risk if the product failed expectations. Quality control was not a modern invention. It lived in the small economies of medieval communities. The ale cup carried trust. When someone paid for it, they expected strength, volume, and safety according to local standards. A poor brew could become a legal matter. Some peasants paid a fee simply to marry freely. In unfree communities, marriage could be tied to lordship. A tenant might owe a payment before marrying, especially if the match affected inheritance, labor obligations, or movement between manors. This fee could feel deeply intrusive because it placed authority inside one of life's most personal decisions. It did not mean every marriage was arranged by a lord, but it did mean that legal status mattered at the threshold of family life. A young couple could face a cost before building a household. A parent might have to negotiate. A widow remarrying could also face financial consequences depending on local custom. These payments reveal how power followed peasants into intimate spaces. Love, alliance, property, fertility, and labor were not separate categories in the medieval countryside. They were bound together. A marriage created future workers, heirs, and tenants. That made it important to the manor as well as to the couple. Freedom could be measured in the right to wed without pain. Serfs could owe labor services instead of paying cash rent. Not every tenant handed over coins. Some owed days of work on the lord's domain, which was the land kept for the lord's direct benefit. These services might include ploughing, reaping, carrying, mowing, carting, or repairing. The burden varied widely by place and period. For a peasant, the hardest part was timing. Labor demanded by the lord could fall when the tenant's own fields also needed urgent attention. That created a painful conflict. Work done for another household might cost success at home. Cash rent offered more flexibility when money was available, but labor services tied a person's body directly to obligation. They also required supervision. Officials had to record who appeared, who worked poorly, and who failed to come. This system made status visible. A free tenant might bargain differently from an unfree one. To owe labor was to feel lordship not as an idea, but as hours removed from one's own survival. A lord's reeve watched the fields and managed village obligations. The reeve was often drawn from the peasant community, which made the role powerful and uncomfortable. He helped oversee agricultural work, organize labor services, account for produce, supervise tasks, and report failures. Because he knew local people, he could not easily be fooled. Because he lived among them, he could not easily escape resentment. The position required practical knowledge as well as loyalty to the manor. A reeve needed to understand ploughing, harvest timing, livestock, storage, and the value of labor. He might be responsible if things went badly. Some villagers may have respected a capable reeve. Others may have seen him as the lord's eyes inside their own community. The role shows how medieval power often worked through local people rather than distant nobles alone. Authority did not always arrive on horseback from the manor house. Sometimes it stood in the next field, held by a neighbor who knew exactly what everyone owed. Bailiffs could make rural life feel watched and controlled. A bailiff served the interests of an estate owner by overseeing management, collecting dues, enforcing rights, and checking whether tenants met obligations. Unlike a neighborly official rooted in the village, a bailiff could feel more directly tied to lordly authority. His visits might bring inspections, demands, or pressure. He could question accounts, measure work, pursue arrears, and challenge evasions. For peasants, this meant the manor was not merely a background structure. It had representatives who could appear in daily life and turn custom into enforcement. A bailiff's reputation mattered. A fair one could keep order. A harsh one could become hated. Estate records sometimes suggest constant attention to productivity, waste, and discipline. Rural life could therefore feel observed, especially when labor services, rents, and profits were under scrutiny. The fields were not just places of work. They were places of accounting. Every missing day, neglected task, or unpaid due could be noticed and carried upward. Peasant resistance often began with slow work and missing payments. Rebellion did not always begin with crowds and weapons. It could start with delay. A tenant might arrive late, perform labor badly, avoid a duty, hide produce, refuse a fee, or insist on an older custom that limited the lord's demand. These small acts could be hard to prove and harder to suppress completely. They mattered because peasants usually knew the land, the rules, and the weaknesses of enforcement better than outsiders did. Resistance could be collective without being openly announced. If many households dragged their feet, the manor felt it. If records were disputed, memory became a weapon. If payments failed, pressure returned to officials. Such behavior was risky, and punishment could follow. But open revolt was not the only form of defiance. The countryside contained a constant negotiation over power. Peasants were not simply passive victims. They pushed back in ways suited to their world, using time, knowledge, silence, and stubborn custom as tools. The peasants. Revolt showed that ordinary workers could terrify rulers. In 1381, anger in England erupted into one of the most dramatic uprisings of the Middle Ages. Tax pressure, labor controls, resentment after plague, and hostility toward officials all fed the movement. Crowds from the countryside entered London, attacked symbols of authority, and forced the young King Richard II into negotiation. The shock was enormous. People who were expected to obey had moved with political purpose and frightening speed. Leaders such as Wat Tyler became names remembered far beyond their villages. The revolt was eventually suppressed, and promises made during the crisis did not bring the full transformation rebels wanted. Yet the event revealed something rulers could not forget. The laboring population was not merely a resource to be counted. It could organize, speak, march, and threaten the center of power itself. For a brief moment, the social order looked breakable. That memory remained powerful even after the gallows and pardons had done their work. After the Black Death, surviving laborers could demand better terms. The plague that struck Europe in the 14th century caused terrible loss, but it also changed the value of work. When so many people died, landowners still needed fields cultivated, animals managed, and harvests gathered. There were fewer hands to do it. Surviving laborers understood this. Some asked for higher wages. Some moved in search of better opportunities. Some refused older burdens or negotiated from a stronger position. Authorities tried to control wages and movement because the old order depended on cheap and dependable labor. Yet economic reality had shifted. A worker who had once been easily replaced could become difficult to secure. This did not make life suddenly fair. Grief, disease, and instability were everywhere. But the balance between lord and laborer had changed in a way no decree could fully erase. The catastrophe opened cracks in the system. Out of mass death came a grim and unexpected form of bargaining power for those who survived. Labor shortages changed the balance between peasants and landlords. When workers became scarce, land itself was less useful without people to farm it. Lords could own acres, barns, mills, and rights, but crops still needed hands. This gave tenants and hired laborers more leverage in some regions. They could press for wages, lighter services, or better leases. Landlords responded in different ways. Some tried stricter enforcement. Some converted labor obligations into cash rents. Some leased out domain lands rather than directly managing them. The result was uneven, but important. Economic pressure began to loosen older forms of dependence. Rural society did not transform overnight. and many people remained poor. Still, scarcity of labor made human effort more visible as a source of power. The people who cut grain, drove animals, repaired ditches, and carried harvests could no longer be treated as endlessly replaceable. A missing workforce forced the elite to confront a truth peasants had always known. Land produces nothing without labor. Some peasants became prosperous enough to employ poorer neighbors. The word peasant can hide major differences. Some rural people barely scraped by on tiny holdings. Others accumulated land, animals, tools, savings, and influence. A wealthier peasant might hire workers at harvest, lend seed, brew for sale, lease extra strips, or serve in village office. Such people were still below the nobility, but they could stand above poorer neighbors in very real ways. Their homes might be larger. Their clothing might be better. Their barns might hold more security. This created a layered village society. Inequality did not exist only between castle and cottage. It lived inside the village itself. A prosperous tenant could be a source of help, credit, employment, or pressure. Poorer families might depend on them during difficult seasons. That dependence could build loyalty or resentment. Seeing this complexity changes the whole picture. Medieval peasant life was not one flat condition. It was a ladder with many rungs, and some ordinary villagers climbed higher than others. Not every peasant was poor in the same way. Poverty had many forms. One person might have land, but not enough animals. Another might have laboring strength, but no secure holding. A widow might possess a cottage, but lack adult help. A cotter might keep a garden and a few rights while working for wages. A landless laborer might depend almost entirely on seasonal employment. Some households suffered temporary hardship after illness, debt, or crop failure. Others lived in long-term insecurity. This variety mattered because survival strategies differed. A family with a cow had options that a family without livestock did not. A household with grown children had labor that an elderly couple lacked. Access to common resources could soften poverty, while exclusion could make it desperate. Medieval records often reduce people to status labels, but real life was more complicated. To understand rural society, we have to ask not only who was poor, but how they were poor. The answer shaped every choice before them. Villeins, cotters, and free tenants lived under different rules. Medieval villages contained people with different legal positions. A free tenant might hold land with fewer personal restrictions. A villein often owed labor services and faced limits tied to lordship. A cotter usually held a smaller cottage plot and depended more heavily on wage work or common rights. These categories varied by region, and local custom could matter as much as formal theory. Still, status shaped daily possibilities. It influenced inheritance, marriage fees, movement, court obligations, and bargaining power. Two neighbors might work side by side in the same field while living under different legal burdens. This made village society more complex than a simple divide between rich lord and poor peasant. Law reached into ordinary routines. It could decide what a person owed, what they could sell, where they could go, and how secure their children might be. Status was not merely a label. It was a set of invisible lines that followed a person through life. A small difference in status could shape an entire lifetime. One household might owe a labor service that another did not. One daughter might need permission to marry, while another could wed with fewer restrictions. One son might inherit securely, while another faced stronger claims from a lord or family rivals. These differences could look technical on parchment, but they shaped real futures. Status affected how much time a person controlled, how easily they moved, how they negotiated, and how they were treated in court. It could influence whom they married and what their children inherited. Over years, a small advantage could grow. A little more freedom meant better timing for one's own fields. Fewer fees meant more goods kept at home. Stronger rights meant more confidence in disputes. Medieval society often turned fine distinctions into lived realities. People understood exactly where they stood because standing mattered. A single legal category could determine whether life felt like a narrow path or a slightly wider road. Market days connected quiet villages to a wider medieval world. For a rural family, the market was more than a place to buy and sell. It was where the village touched the outside. A person might arrive with eggs, cheese, wool, vegetables, or a small animal, then return with salt, ironwork, cloth, news, or gossip from several miles away. Prices told people things they could not see directly. Expensive grain might mean shortage elsewhere. A rush of traders might hint at war, feast demand, or changing roads. The market also created encounters that ordinary village life could not provide. A peasant could meet town officials, traveling sellers, craftsmen, servants, pilgrims, or strangers speaking with unfamiliar accents. Bargaining required confidence and memory. A bad deal could hurt a household for weeks. A good one could bring a little comfort home. Market day widened the mental map of people whose daily work stayed close to the fields. For a few hours, the world became larger, louder, and full of possibility. Coins mattered more as trade reached deeper into rural life. Early medieval rural exchange often relied heavily on goods, labor, and custom. Over time, money became more important in many places. This change altered how peasants understood value. A hen, a measure of grain, or a day of work could be compared to silver. Rent could be paid in cash where older services had once dominated. Wages could be earned by laborers who moved from farm to farm. Fines, tolls, market purchases, and tools increasingly drew ordinary people into a money economy. Coins were small, but their effect was large. They allowed flexibility. They also created new pressure. A household might have enough food and still struggle if it lacked cash when a payment was due. Selling produce at the wrong time could mean a poor price. Holding it too long could risk spoilage. Money made rural life more connected, but also more exposed. The countryside did not remain outside commerce. It was slowly pulled into its counting. Some peasants sold eggs, cheese, ale, wool, or vegetables. Small trade could make a large difference. A household did not need to be wealthy to enter the local economy. A few hens could produce eggs for sale. A cow could provide milk that became cheese. A garden could yield surplus onions or beans. A skilled brewer could turn grain into drink. Wool from sheep might be sold raw, spun, or worked further, depending on time and ability. These goods were modest, but they created cash or exchange value. That mattered when rent, salt, repairs, or a new tool required payment. Such selling also gave women and poorer households a way to participate in markets without large landholdings. The amounts might look tiny in official records, but they could decide whether a family bought a needed pot or repaid a neighbor. Medieval rural life was not only great harvests and lordly dues. It was also 100 small transactions, each one helping a household stay afloat. Roads were rough, but news still traveled surprisingly far. A muddy track could slow a cart to a crawl. A broken bridge could turn a journey into a detour. Yet information moved. It traveled with merchants, clergy, messengers, soldiers, laborers, beggars, pilgrims, entertainers, and relatives visiting other settlements. News did not need printed papers to spread. It passed from mouth to mouth at markets, church doors, mills, inns, and manor courts. Some stories changed as they traveled. Others carried real information about taxes, war, disease, prices, royal commands, or opportunities for work. A peasant might never see the capital, but could still hear of events there. Rumor was powerful because it arrived wrapped in uncertainty. Was a new tax coming? Had a battle been lost? Was plague nearby? People had to judge the speaker, the detail, and the urgency. Bad roads limited movement, but they did not silence the countryside. Medieval villages were more connected than they looked, joined by footsteps and speech. Traveling peddlers brought needles, ribbons, gossip, and outside stories. The peddler could arrive with a pack full of small wonders. Needles, pins, combs, laces, ribbons, buttons, cheap jewelry, knives, or trinkets might appear at a cottage door or village gathering. These items were not grand, but they mattered. A needle could repair clothing. A ribbon could brighten a feast day. A small knife could become a household necessity. The peddler also carried talk. He knew what roads were safe, what towns were busy, what prices were rising, and what strange events people were discussing elsewhere. For villagers who rarely traveled far, such a visitor brought the outside world in portable form. Trust was uncertain. Some peddlers were welcome, while others were suspected of cheating, spying, or spreading trouble. That tension made the encounter vivid. A simple purchase could become an exchange of information. The pack on the traveler's back held goods, but his memory held something just as valuable. He sold usefulness and carried stories. Fairs could feel like sudden windows onto the wider world. Unlike the weekly market, a fair could draw people from much farther away. It might last for days and gather traders, animals, entertainers, craftsmen, money changers, food sellers, and officials into one crowded space. For peasants, the scale could be astonishing. Goods appeared that were rarely seen in ordinary village life. Fine cloth, spices, metalware, decorated wares, horses, books, or foreign-looking objects might pass before their eyes, even if they could not afford them. Fairs were also places of risk. Pickpockets, dishonest traders, disease, debt, and disorder could follow the excitement. Yet the attraction was powerful. A fair allowed a person to compare prices, hear news, seek work, settle deals, and enjoy spectacle. It compressed the wider economy into a temporary world of noise and color. To visit one was to discover that the countryside was not isolated. Beyond the village lay a moving network of trade, appetite, law, and chance. Peasants knew local boundaries through memory, landmarks, and custom. Before modern maps were common in rural hands, people carried the shape of their world in the mind. A boundary might run beside an old oak, along a ditch, over a ridge, past a stone, or toward a stream bend known to everyone nearby. These markers mattered because land use depended on them. Grazing rights, wood gathering, field strips, paths, and parish limits all needed recognition. Communities sometimes walked boundaries together in ritual form, especially to teach the young where one place ended and another began. Memory became a legal tool. Older villagers could testify about where a line had always stood. A forgotten marker could cause trouble. A moved stone could look like theft. The landscape was therefore full of meaning invisible to outsiders. A hedge was not just a hedge. It might be an argument settled long ago. Peasants knew their local geography with precision because survival, rights, and reputation depended on remembering it correctly. Disputes over a ditch could become serious legal battles. A small channel in the ground could decide whether a field drained properly, whether a boundary held, or whether animals crossed where they should not. That is why arguments over ditches, hedges, paths, and fences could become fierce. To modern eyes, such disputes may seem petty. To a peasant household, they could affect crops, grazing, access, and legal standing. If one neighbor failed to maintain a ditch, water might damage another's land. If a boundary line shifted, a family could lose use of valuable ground. Local courts often heard these conflicts because they touched custom and memory. Witnesses might be called. Fines might be imposed. Repairs might be ordered. The seriousness of such cases shows how tightly rural life was packed into the landscape. Every edge mattered. Every line carried consequence. A ditch was both practical and symbolic. It carried water, but it also carried the question of who had rights and who had failed their duty. Animals wandered, damaged crops, and caused endless village arguments. Livestock did not always respect human plans. A broken fence, an open gate, or careless herding could send cows, pigs, sheep, or geese into places where they caused real harm. A few animals in a grain field could destroy food that had taken months to grow. A pig, rooting where it should not, could turn soil and anger neighbors. Stray beasts might be impounded until fines were paid. This created constant tension because animals were valuable and troublesome at once. Owners wanted to protect them, feed them, and profit from them. Neighbors wanted their own crops safe. The village had rules for grazing, tethering, driving, and enclosing. But daily life rarely ran perfectly. Children might be given the job of watching animals because one mistake could become a public dispute. These conflicts reveal a village in motion. Human society and animal behavior were constantly negotiating space. A wandering cow could bring law, anger, and laughter in its wake. Medieval pigs could be valuable, dangerous, and legally troublesome. Pigs were among the most useful animals a peasant family could keep, but they were not harmless. They were strong, clever, and hungry. They could break into crops, roam through lanes, frighten children, and injure people. In some medieval records, pigs were even involved in legal cases after causing serious harm. Their value made them worth the trouble. They converted scraps, whey, acorns, and waste into meat and fat. A well-fed pig could become one of the most important food resources a household possessed. Yet managing one required control. Rings might be placed in snouts to stop rooting. Herding rules could be enforced. Owners could be fined when animals caused damage. The pig sat at the boundary between asset and nuisance. It was walking wealth with a will of its own. For medieval villagers, no animal better showed the comedy and danger of daily rural life. It could feed a family and ruin a neighbor's field. Cows gave milk, manure, muscle, and fragile household security. A cow could change the prospects of a family. Milk could be drunk fresh or turned into butter and cheese. Manure helped restore tired soil. A strong animal could sometimes assist with pulling or carrying, depending on local practice and need. Calves offered future value. Yet this security was fragile because a cow demanded care every day. It needed grazing, winter fodder, shelter, water, and protection from disease. If it stopped giving milk or died suddenly, the household could lose food, income, and status all at once. This made animal health a matter of deep anxiety. People watched appetite, movement, coat condition, and milk yield with careful attention. A cow was not simply property. It was a living store of possibility. Its body connected the pasture to the table and the buyer to the fields. For poorer villagers, owning one could mark the thin line between managing and falling into need. Chickens turned kitchen scraps into eggs and small income. Few animals could fit so easily into the edges of household life. Chickens scratched around yards, ate leftovers, hunted insects, and produced eggs with little space compared with larger livestock. Their usefulness was modest but steady. Eggs gave protein, could be cooked quickly, and might be sold or exchanged in small quantities. Hens also reproduced, which made them a living resource that could grow if disease, predators, or theft did not interfere. Women and children often managed poultry because it could be done alongside other tasks near the home. That closeness mattered. A household without much land might still keep a few birds and gain something from them. Chickens were vulnerable to foxes, dogs, hawks, and careless neighbors, so their survival required attention. Their value lay in frequency rather than grandeur. One egg was small. Many eggs over time became food, bargaining power, and a quiet form of resilience. In peasant life, small gains mattered greatly. Manure was precious because soil fertility meant future survival. To modern ears, manure may sound like waste. In a medieval village, it was wealth in another form. Fields lost nutrients when crops were harvested, and without replacement, the soil weakened. Animal dung, bedding straw, household sweepings, and organic refuse could be gathered and spread to restore strength to the land. The better the manure supply, the better the chance of future yields. This made livestock valuable not only for food or labor, but also for what they left behind. A household with animals had an advantage over one without them. Managing manure was dirty, heavy work, but it was deeply important. It linked barn floors to bread and byres to next year's harvest. Villagers understood the results even without modern chemistry. Tired land grew poorly. Enriched land fed people. Nothing in the farm system was truly separate. The waste of today could become the crop of tomorrow. Survival depended on seeing value where others might see filth. Peasants watched the sky for weather signs and warnings. Weather forecasting began with attention. Villagers studied cloud shapes, wind direction, animal behavior, dawn color, evening light, and changes in dampness or smell. Some signs were based on real patterns. Others came from tradition and hopeful interpretation. Either way, watching the sky was practical. A decision to cut hay, sow seed, travel to market, or leave grain exposed could depend on what people believed the weather would do. One wrong guess might cost days of labor. Older farmers carried remembered seasons in their minds and compared them with present signs. A certain wind might suggest rain. A sudden stillness might feel ominous. Birds feeding low, smoke falling, or aching joints could become clues. Medieval peasants did not have instruments or forecasts, but they had urgency. They watched because they had to. The sky was not background. It was an enormous moving message above the village, and everyone tried to read it before it changed their fate. Folklore helped explain misfortune when science offered little comfort. When a cow sickened, a child weakened, milk soured, or crops failed without obvious cause, people searched for meaning. Folklore offered patterns that made fear easier to name. Misfortune might be linked to envy, curses, spirits, unlucky days, broken taboos, or signs ignored too long. These explanations did not replace practical action. A family could repair a fence, use herbs, pray, and still wonder whether unseen forces were involved. Folklore gave communities a language for uncertainty. It also shaped blame, which could be dangerous. Suspicion could fall on outsiders, quarrelsome neighbors, old women, or anyone considered strange. Yet such beliefs also provided comfort. If trouble had a cause, perhaps it could be answered. A charm, ritual, blessing, or apology might restore a sense of control. Medieval peasants lived in a world where natural and supernatural explanations often stood together. Folklore filled the gap between what people suffered and what they could prove. Charms and prayers often lived side by side in healing. A healing act might include a plant remedy, a spoken formula, a cross marked over the body, and an appeal to a saint. To modern minds, these categories may seem separate. In medieval life, they often belonged together. Words had power because sacred speech, ritual repetition, and inherited custom were believed to shape events. A charm might call on Christian figures or older patterns whose origins were harder to trace. A prayer could ask for divine mercy, while a poultice worked on the skin. The goal was not intellectual purity. It was relief. People used the tools available to them when illness brought fear into the home. Clergy sometimes condemned certain practices, especially if they seemed superstitious or unapproved. Yet popular healing remained blended because suffering was urgent. A mother with a feverish child cared more about help than categories. The sickbed became a meeting place of body, faith, memory, and hope. Midwives held knowledge that communities depended on at dangerous moments. Childbirth brought both expectation and fear. Midwives carried experience that could make the difference between panic and action. They knew how to support labor, recognize danger, handle the newborn, and comfort the mother. Their knowledge was practical, learned through repeated attendance rather than university training. They also had a spiritual role in many Christian communities because emergency baptism could be necessary if an infant seemed unlikely to survive. This placed midwives at the edge of life, death, medicine, and religion. Their work happened in intimate spaces where men were often absent. Women gathered, helped, prayed, heated water, prepared cloths, and waited. A skilled midwife became trusted because every family understood the stakes. She could not control every outcome, and many dangers lay beyond her power. Still, her presence mattered enormously. In a village where professional medical care was limited, she represented memory, composure, and female authority at one of life's most perilous thresholds. Childbirth was one of the great risks of peasant life. For medieval women, pregnancy could be joyful and frightening at the same time. Labor carried dangers that modern medicine can often reduce, but which then were harder to manage. Heavy bleeding, infection, obstructed labor, exhaustion, and infant distress could become life-threatening. Poor nutrition and repeated pregnancies increased the strain. A birth also affected the whole household. A surviving child brought future hope, but the mother's death could leave older children vulnerable and the farm weakened. Religious preparation mattered because everyone knew the risk. Women might pray to protective saints, wear blessed objects, make vows, or seek churching after recovery. The emotional world around birth was therefore intense. It joined love, fear, faith, pain, and community support. Records cannot capture every bedside, but they show why childbirth carried such weight in memory and custom. It was not a private medical event. It was a moment when a family's future hung inside one room. Death was familiar, but burial placed people within community memory. Medieval villagers encountered death often, through illness, accident, childbirth, hunger, violence, and age. Yet familiarity did not make loss meaningless. Burial placed a person back inside the parish community in a visible and sacred way. The churchyard gathered generations under the same ground where the living worshipped. Funeral rites helped the soul and comforted survivors. Neighbors attended, prayed, remembered debts, settled goods, and absorbed the change. Even a poor burial carried social meaning because it confirmed belonging. Where someone was buried could matter. Nearer the church might be more desirable. Memorials varied greatly, and many peasant graves left little trace. Still, memory did not depend only on stone. It lived in names spoken at home, in anniversaries, in land passed down, and in stories attached to places. Burial joined the living and dead in the same sacred landscape. The village was not only a settlement of the present, it was a community layered with those who had gone before. Graveyards kept ancestors physically close to the living village. The dead were not far away. They lay beside the church, near the paths people walked for worship, meetings, festivals, and announcements. Children grew up passing graves of relatives they knew, and ancestors they knew only by name. This closeness shaped how people understood time. The past was not hidden in distant cemeteries outside daily life. It rested at the center of the parish. Bones beneath the grass reminded everyone that families extended backward as well as forward. The churchyard could also be a place of social encounter, legal notice, and community movement, though it remained sacred ground. In times of crisis, the number of burials could make grief feel overwhelming. In ordinary years, the graveyard quietly taught continuity. A peasant working nearby might live within sight of parents, grandparents, and neighbors who had shaped the same fields. The dead remained part of the village map. Their presence made belonging physical, local, and impossible to forget. Medieval peasants slept in rhythms shaped by darkness and firelight. Night did not begin at a fixed hour on a clock. It arrived with the loss of usable light. In winter, darkness could fold over the village early, while summer evenings allowed more activity. Artificial light was limited, so people organized sleep around the hearth, moon, season, and household need. Some evidence suggests that in many pre-modern societies, sleep could be broken into periods, with wakeful intervals used for prayer, talk, small tasks, or reflection. Whether every peasant slept this way is impossible to say, but their nights were certainly less ruled by modern schedules. Animals might need attention. A baby might cry. A fire might need tending. A noise outside might wake the household. Beds were often shared, and privacy was limited. Sleep was therefore communal, practical, and responsive to the environment. Rest came inside a world of cold floors, breathing bodies, fading embers, and a darkness that shaped behavior more strongly than any bell. Night brought danger from thieves, animals, spirits, and imagination. After sunset, familiar places changed. Paths became harder to read. Woods felt closer. Strange sounds carried farther. A loose animal, a suspicious traveler, or a creaking door could stir along. Theft was a real concern because tools, livestock, fuel, and stored food were precious. Predators and stray dogs could threaten animals. Darkness also opened space for supernatural fear. People told stories of ghosts, demons, fairies, wandering souls, and signs that appeared when the ordinary world slept. These beliefs were not merely entertainment. They shaped caution. A person might avoid certain places, carry a charm, say a prayer, or hurry home before full darkness. Night magnified uncertainty because evidence became harder to see. Imagination filled the gaps left by poor light. The same lame walked daily could feel unfamiliar after the sun dropped. For peasants, night was not empty time. It was a different country laid over the village, one governed by risk, memory, and fear. The moon could decide whether work continued after sunset. Moonlight mattered in the world without easy lighting. A bright moon could make travel safer, help people return from a distant field, or allow certain tasks to continue after daylight faded. A dark moon made movement harder and more dangerous. This affected labor, social life, and crime. A thief might prefer deeper darkness. A traveler might plan around a clearer night. Harvest pressure could push people to use every available hour when conditions allowed. Moon phases also carried cultural meaning. People connected them with planting, weather, tides, bodily rhythms, and luck, though beliefs varied by place. What matters is that the moon was not decorative. It was useful. Its light could extend human activity beyond the sun's rule. A peasant looking up at a bright night sky might see opportunity as well as beauty. The difference between darkness and pale light could determine whether a journey was possible, whether a task was finished, or whether caution won. Candlelight was precious, so darkness shaped the pace of life. A good candle cost resources. Wax candles burned cleanly, but beeswax was valuable and often associated with churches or wealthier households. Tallow candles were cheaper, but they smoked and smelled. Rushlights offered another option, made by dipping prepared rushes into fat, but they burned for limited periods. Because light required material, people did not waste it casually. Tasks after dark had to justify the expense. Fine work might be difficult. Reading, for those who could read, depended on access to light. Household activity gathered near the fire because it gave brightness along with heat. Darkness therefore slowed life and shaped choices. People rose earlier when daylight served them better. Winter nights encouraged indoor crafts that could be done by touch and habit. The cost of light made the modern habit of extending day into night impossible for most. Medieval darkness was not just absence. It was an economic fact that told people when to stop, sleep, listen, or wait. Village soundscapes included bells, animals, tools, voices, and weather. A medieval village was alive with sound. The day might begin with roosters, lowing cattle, creaking carts, chopping wood, and footsteps on packed earth. Work added its own music. Hammers struck, wheels turned, buckets splashed, gates thudded, and scythes whispered through grass. Human voices carried across open spaces, calling children, bargaining, scolding animals, greeting neighbors, or singing during labor. Bells gave sacred and social signals above everything else. Weather changed the whole soundscape. Rain drummed on thatch. Wind moved through trees. Frost could make the ground crunch underfoot. These sounds mattered because people listened for information. A distressed animal, a cart arriving late, or a bell at an unusual time could draw attention quickly. The village was not quiet in the modern romantic sense. It was full of signals. People lived by hearing as much as seeing. Sound told them who was moving, what was happening, and whether something had gone wrong. Smells of smoke, dung, bread, and livestock filled daily life. The medieval countryside had a strong physical presence. Smoke clung to clothing. Dung lay near barns, lanes, yards, and fields. Bread baking could scent the air with comfort. Animals brought warmth, sweat, hides, milk, and waste. Wet wool, sour ale, stored onions, damp straw, and turned soil, all added to the mixture. These smells were not background details. They marked work, status, danger, and home. Rot could warn of spoiled food. Fresh bread could signal security. Manure meant future fertility. Smoke meant heat and cooking. Modern people often imagine the past visually, but smell would have shaped memory just as powerfully. A peasant might recognize a household, a season, or a problem by scent. The village nose was trained by necessity. bad air could be feared. Clean herbs or fresh rushes could improve a room. Daily life was not sanitized. It was immediate, bodily, and constantly reminding people that survival had a smell. Peasants repaired tools because replacement could be painfully expensive. A broken tool was never just an object failing. It could interrupt work that needed to happen at the right moment. Iron was costly. Skilled smithing required payment. Wood had to be selected, shaped, seasoned, and fitted. Because of this, peasants kept tools alive as long as possible. Handles were replaced. Blades were sharpened. Hoops were tightened. Pegs were remade. Cracks were bound. A repaired tool might carry years of use in its shape. This culture of repair came from necessity, but also from knowledge. People understood the materials in their hands. They knew when an edge was wrong, when a shaft was weakening, and when a tool could be saved. The village smith was important because metalwork touched farming, transport, cooking, and building. A household with well-maintained tools had better chances when urgent work arrived. In peasant life, durability was a form of wealth. Repair was not a hobby. It was protection against delay and debt. A good scythe or sickle could shape harvest success. Cutting grain or grass was not simply a matter of swinging metal. The right tool had to match the crop, the worker, the terrain, and the task. A sickle allowed careful cutting of grain stalks and could reduce loss where every ear mattered. A scythe could cover more ground, especially in mowing grass or later grain work, but it required strength, rhythm, and a sharp edge. Dull metal wasted effort and time. Poor technique could scatter grain or exhaust the body. During harvest, speed and care had to live together. A skilled worker with a good blade could accomplish more before weather changed. Sharpening stones, handles, grips, and balance all mattered. The tool became almost an extension of the body. Its quality affected food, rent, animal fodder, and reputation. A simple, curved blade could hold the pressure of an entire year. When the crop stood ready, success depended on hands, weather, and the cutting edge. The medieval village was both a workplace and a world. For peasants, the village was not only where life happened after work. It was the field office, workshop, court, church community, market route, family network, childhood landscape, and burial ground. Its paths held memories. Its buildings held obligations. Its neighbors provided help, judgment, labor, and gossip. A person's identity was formed through this dense local web. To belong meant knowing when to sow, where to graze, whom to trust, which customs mattered, and what stories attached to each place. Leaving could mean opportunity, but it also meant losing a map of relationships that made survival possible. The village could protect and confine at the same time. It gave meaning, but it watched closely. It offered help, but demanded conformity. This is why medieval rural life cannot be reduced to poverty alone. It was an entire social universe built around land and memory. Within a few lanes and fields, people experienced ambition, fear, duty, pleasure, conflict, and hope. Life as a medieval peasant was harsh, skilled, communal, and astonishing. To understand these people, we have to look beyond the old image of helpless laborers bent forever beneath the weight of history. Their lives were often difficult, and the dangers were real. Hunger, disease, authority, weather, debt, and grief pressed hard. Yet they also possessed deep expertise. They read landscapes, managed animals, kept households alive, negotiated customs, repaired tools, raised children, honored the dead, and built communities that endured for generations. Much of their knowledge was never written down, which makes it easy to underestimate. But every loaf, garment, fence, furrow, and festival depended on skill. They fed kingdoms while living close to uncertainty. They carried faith into danger and humor into exhaustion. Their world could be small in distance, but vast in meaning. It held law, memory, labor, love, fear, and resilience. The more closely we listen, the clearer it becomes. Medieval peasant life was not simple. It was one of history's most human stories. And so we come to the end of our journey through life as a medieval peasant. We have walked through fields shaped by the seasons, where every seed carried hope and every harvest carried judgment. We have stepped inside small cottages warmed by hearth fires, where families worked, rested, worried, and endured. We have followed the sound of church bells across the village, watched markets bring news from the wider world, and seen how even the simplest object could hold real importance. A loaf of bread could mean safety. A cow could mean survival. A strip of land could hold generations of memory. A tool, carefully repaired, could help decide the success of a harvest. Even a bundle of firewood, gathered at the right time, could become a quiet victory against winter. These lives were often hard, but they were never empty. They were filled with skill, custom, faith, humor, patience, and deep knowledge of the land. The medieval village was not just a place of labor. It was a whole world, made from work and weather, from neighbors and memory, from fear and hope. If you enjoyed this gentle journey through history, I invite you to like, subscribe, or leave a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. And if you happen to still be awake, there is another journey waiting on the screen, ready whenever you are. But for now, there is nothing more you need to do. Let the fields grow distant. Let the village settle into night. Let the last glow of the hearth fade softly in your mind. Allow your shoulders to loosen. Let your breathing slow. Let the long day fall away piece by piece until only rest remains. Sleep well and good night.